Namaskar, dear friends. Today I'm going to unpack the word magnanimity, which is the second of the Shiilas, or virtues for cultivating a noble character. Magnanimity, such a beautiful word to even pronounce, but I recently discovered it's coming from the Latin roots magnus and animus. So literally, magnus means great and animus is soul. So it means greatness of soul. And I'm going to be looking at three aspects of this greatness of soul. One is how we really stretch towards the manifestation of our greatest potential, of our gifts. The second one is kind of also looking at the opposite of magnanimity, how to avoid the traps of pettiness that keep the mind small. And I also want to look at the mindset of nobility. This is the mindset that allows us to have an inclusive heart, to be tolerant, to be open-minded, and have an outlook on life that is nourishing. I'm also going to distinguish between magnanimity and pride versus humility. Let's start out with the first part, which is reaching towards our greatest potentials. So magnanimity, greatness of soul. You know, I actually didn't have a word for this until I was reading up on magnanimity and realized, oh, that's what it is. When I was small, somehow my father instilled in me this feeling that you have some gifts and you really need to use them to serve others. I remember when I was about 7 years old and we were in the car and he was reading an article about a girl who was also 7 years old who'd written a book. And he was like, wow, she wrote a book at 7 years old. You're falling behind. And in that, there was some, he was transmitting his belief in me. And at the same time, being a very serious young girl, I also took it quite literally. And it created a sensation of pressure, like, oh my God, I'm behind. I should be doing something more. This wasn't always healthy. Sometimes it, creates a sort of workaholic attitude in me. But on the positive side, it's also like I always feel there is more I can do, that the gifts that I've been given are not my own. They're gifts that I'm meant to use and to use them fully. And here is also where that differentiation, that distinction between what is pride and what is magnanimity comes in, because pride is when you feel, wow, I'm special, I have some gifts, and I'm going to use them how I like. And magnanimity, or this stretching towards greatness, is this feeling, I've been given something, and it creates a type of responsibility. That when I recognize, when I see what that gift is, and it's not just me, everybody has a gift, everybody, even people that you might not, assume have a gift. I work with special needs adults that have grown up in our children's home, and I've seen how they also can bring in a gift of peacefulness. There was one boy, and his gift was just the way that he could observe things. And he just gave around him, exuded a kind of sense of peace. So everybody has something that they're offering, that they're bringing. The more that you're aware of it, it's not about pride. It's about honoring that divine gift you've been given, by not hiding it, by not minimizing it, by not taking it for granted, but rather developing it consciously, developing your talents, developing your abilities to serve, so that you can do better and better, and so that you can express the greatness of your soul. So this is one beautiful new insight I've had into this word when I discovered the root meaning of it. The second part is, how do we also avoid the trap of the mind becoming small and petty. Here also sometimes humility is misunderstood. I shouldn't be too bright. I shouldn't be too shining, It might make others feel bad, and so we limit ourselves. We try to take up less space. But this is more about timidity than it is about humility, because humbleness is the ability to recognize the greatness in other people, to see their gift, to see their divinity, to see their potentials without jealousy, and to be able to nourish those things in others, just even by the fact of seeing them. Whereas the tendency to shrink, the tendency to hide, to minimize, it is an avoidance of also the responsibility that can come with having gifts, and utilizing them fully. So that is more a type of timidity that we need to work to free ourselves from, and to become more courageous in stepping up to the challenge that magnanimity of mind offers us to live our biggest life, to live fully and to express fully our potentials. And pettiness is the other main trap. This is when, instead of the mind being wide and open and magnanimous, seeing, looking for and nourishing and seeing the good in others, being happy for the happiness of others, is when you're not happy for the happiness of others. Pettiness is being picky, critical, seeing others' faults, finding fault even where maybe it's not necessary. This kind of pettiness or small-mindedness is the antidote or poison to magnanimity of mind. So we have to watch out for it. We have to be able to recognize it. One practice that is good is to develop the attitude of, my friend is happy. Let her be more happy. She's successful. Let her be more successful. To not to be, why is she? No, she's not really so. Look, she also has faults, or she's not so perfect, or she thinks she's so great. These things tend to make our own mind constricted, contracted, petty. I believe that also one of the secrets to this for myself also is to try and cultivate the attitude of, what if I could look at the world not through my eyes, but how would I look at the world if I was looking with the eyes of that higher self, that supreme benevolence, the Parama Purusha. Parama Purusha is a Sanskrit term which literally means, Parama means supreme, and Purusha means either self or soul. So looking at the world through the eyes of the Supreme Soul, trying to think, how would this person look to that? If I was looking at them with that supreme benevolence, what would I see? And if you really meditate on that, your heart's going to expand. It will free you from that tendency towards pettiness, towards self-interest. When I had an exam in India, when I was just passing my first stage of becoming a full-time worker for this type of mission, then the examiner asked me exactly on this point, what is magnanimity of mind? And I tried my best to give some definition, and he wasn't satisfied. And then he gave an example, which I remember to this day. If you're sitting together and you're with your friends and there's some mangoes, and you open up the mango that you've received and it's rotten inside, what do you do? And he said, normally the other mangoes are good, maybe you'd be like, oh, mine's rotten. Let's share those other mangoes. Or why did I get the rotten one? Why do I always get the rotten one? But that's pettiness. The magnanimous person would be, it's so good that I got the rotten one, so that all my other friends, they have good, sweet, ripe mangoes, perfect mangoes to enjoy, and to be happy for their happiness. This is the attitude of magnanimity. Another moment that really impressed me for magnanimity was I was around one of our senior teachers, another Didi, and she's a spectacular person, just very elevated soul, and also extremely wise and intelligent. And anyway, she was sitting down to eat breakfast. She had been called to, we were in Los Angeles, and she'd been called to give a big lecture in front of thousands of people that day. And my job was to serve her breakfast and bring her to the conference. But I'm just a humble, new, young person. And she opens up a letter that was there addressed to her, and she begins reading it out loud to me. As she reads it and progresses through the letter began on a very critical tone, and it only increased in intensity. And I felt embarrassed just listening to it, accusing her of having a big ego and, was she really happy? And it was very, very, very judgmental, very critical, very negative, kind of poisonous. And I was so surprised that as soon as it became negative, that she didn't stop reading. She continued reading it. And not only that, with a very calm, light, with the same kind of smiling, unaffected tone as if the person had written her a very positive letter. She did not look or appear to be disturbed by it at all. When she finished, she just simply put it down and she looked at me and she said, our fellow human beings expect great things of us. That is why we must try hard not to disappoint them. And I was just like, wow. Wow, because anyone else would have started getting defensive, reacted, who's this person? Who do they think they are? It was just so noble. I really had not ever seen such a reaction before. So it became quite a model for me of what is possible when someone is firmly established in this virtue. The last aspect of magnanimity is this mindset. How do we cultivate this mindset that allows our mind to be noble, that gives us that attitude of inclusiveness, that gives us this attitude of tolerance and open-mindedness and benevolence towards all? Because I think that's really the key. This is about the opposite of pettiness and all of these things is benevolence. The magnanimity is rooted in that. This mindset is coming from that ability to cultivate looking through the eyes of the divine when you look at things, and also to recognize yourself in everyone. Now, it's easy to want to recognize yourself in beautiful things, but it's harder when you're confronted with things that irritate you in other people. But often those are mirrors, where we want to push away, where we feel some aversion. This is where our mind's starting to contract and risks to fall into pettiness. So when we observe that happening, the antidote to that is to look right straight at your shadow that is being mirrored back to you, and to recognize yourself in that, to recognize how you are just like that person on some level, that you also can be scared or anxious or selfish or whatever it is you're reacting to, and to connect to the humanity, to see the sameness in all people, whether they're they're irritating or whether they're pleasant, but to see the sameness, to connect to the humanity, not to be put off by the surface level. Whether the surface level is also that people appear to be different than us. And so we've made stereotypes or some kind of bias about them. But really to be open to that oneness that connects us all. And this creates that really forgiving, understanding, empathic, magnanimous state of mind, in which then people that come around, you or come around such a person, the way I felt in front of Didi, get touched. One of my heroes from a different realm, more from social activism, is Nelson Mandela. And similarly, he is, for me, such a noble character. And I was really touched by a story about his meeting with a general, Villion, who, it was the year 1994. So he had risen he'd been released from prison, and the next year was scheduled the first multiracial elections, and apartheid was already beginning to be dismantled. And there were several generals who had already started to mobilize military might to create an insurrection and to fight against this. And Nelson Mandela did a very courageous thing, which was to invite one of the leaders, this General Villion, to his house for tea. Now, when the general arrived, of course, kind of tense situation, and, he was expecting the door to be opened by a servant, but instead, it was Nelson Mandela himself who opened the door and welcomed the general. And then he brought him into his living room to have a private word with him before engaging with the more formal part of the discussions, and offered him tea himself. He asked the general, "Do you take tea?" And he said, "Yes, I do." And Nelson Mandela began to pour the tea. "And do you take it with milk?" he asked, very softly, very gently. And the general again was taken back. "Yes, I do." And he poured the milk. "And do you also take sugar?" And he served the sugar as well. And then he handed the tea to the general. And the general was so moved by this, he said, "All I had to do was stir it." Now, this was deeply symbolic because this was a gesture of stepping into the values, the culture of his potential opponent. No, he was showing respect for their customs, for these European customs that were so important to them. So this was a gesture laden with symbolism and laden with respect. Nelson Mandela had suffered for years in jail, because of apartheid, because of so much injustice. And many people would have been embittered and their mind would have become full of resentment and anger. But Nelson Mandela understood that for there to be lasting peace, there had to be, and not just cycles of violence that never end, there has to be a way for everyone to be that represented, and that also the white Afrikaners were essential. And so, he openly said to him later when the talks began, your trained military is no match for us, but we are the majority and you can't kill us all. And we have the world on our side. And so, recognizing this kind of ability to recognize the strengths of both, but also his trust in the humanity that was underneath all of these expressions of hate and racism really had a transformative effect. And it brought Villion and the people that he was representing to the table They did participate eventually in the elections. He himself ended up in the Congress, and Nelson Mandela greeted him with a warm smile and handshake. And he was like, no, no, for me, you are my president, and I'm a military man, and therefore I'm going to stand at attention and give you a salute. So, you know, it created, not that they saw the same on issues, but it created respect. And all of this, you know, of being able to avert such a potential tragic shedding of blood that could have gone on endlessly. You know, this was due to magnanimity of mind, to that large-heartedness, to his inclusive outlook, to his belief in the humanity of everyone, including the people who had been the architects and the protectors of apartheid. So that creates a noble character. That creates somebody memorable, you know. And we have opportunities every day to start exercising and practicing this. We're not all Nelson Mandelas, obviously, but we can take inspiration. And somehow when I see, wow, if he could do that in such an extreme situation, why can't I do it in a much smaller context? You know, my problems and injustices or whatever that I might have suffered pale in comparison with anything that he would have faced. So these things give me inspiration, and yeah, I think it is a quality that it's the second of the Shiilas. So again, many of us only remember the first few in the list. It's positioned there because it is one of the crowning virtues for a spiritual person to develop this ability, because you're becoming a reflection of magnus animus, which is another way of also saying Parama Purusha, no? The great soul. That great soul expressing through you, through your outlook, through your mindset, and most importantly, through your actions, becoming an inclusive expression of that divine love for all. Thank you. Namaskar. Namaskar. Dear friends, thank you so much for your contributions that are making this channel possible. It is your support and donations that are allowing meditation to reach so many people in a really accessible way. The inspirations and spirituality that you are making possible to spread a change of consciousness on the planet can only happen with your support. So if you'd like to find out more how to be part of this change and bring meditation to more people, there's more information below in the description. Thank you so much. Namaskar.